بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الحلال بين والحرام بين إلى آخر الحديث أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. I'd like to just pick up from where I left off from last time, as a brother also requested me to talk about it, and I think it is also important that we talk about this issue. And if you recall, last time we were talking about sins. Last time we were talking about sins and how a person who saves himself from committing sins is held in great and high esteem, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But today I'd like to go in the opposite direction and show to you how detrimental sins can be to a person, and how badly they can affect a person's life, not only in this world but also in the hereafter. If you recall, the very first time we had this Fajr speaking, when we sat down after Fajr, you recall that hadith which I mentioned about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioning the three qualities which are found within a person. If they are found, then that person, he will find the sweetness of Iman within his heart. And the last one which the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam he mentioned was that a person dislikes returning towards kufr, just like he dislikes being thrown into the fire. And then you remember I mentioned that this should not be just taken with the example of kufr, and the fire, just like how a person, when he's thrown into fire, he will die. Similarly, kufr is the death of a person's heart and the death of this person's iman. Or similarly, likewise, when a person commits a sin, even though his iman is intact, the example of that is like a person who puts his hand in a fire. Even though his life is still there, he's still going to live, but he's burnt himself and he's caused himself grievous harm. So this is one example of sins, how detrimental a sin can be. It has a very, very bad effect on a person. And not only on a person himself, but also in society in itself. And we might not see it, sins, obviously, they're not the sins that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to stay away from. They're not part of the country's laws or the legislation of law. But even if you take it into literal context, if you look at the laws of this land, if everybody was to break the law of the land, not only one person, but even one person actually, start at one person, and slowly this one person, because of him committing a sin, breaking the law, slowly other people. Take for example riots. Riots don't start off, big scale. It starts from small, one gang, and then slowly other people start joining this riot, and slowly you see corruption spreading in that area. Similarly, sins we might not see, and obviously we're not going to get punished by by the law, by the police or anything like that. But sins, they have such a detrimental effect that if one person starts, and then other people see this habit, they start spreading this sin and sin. This entire, as this sin spreads within the people, this entire locality becomes, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it becomes cursed, and it becomes, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in a verse of the Quran. He calls, even to one extent, there's one ayah that Allah says, "Qaryat zalim," that the oppressing town, but the town itself isn't oppressing. The people in the town, they are the oppressors. But because of this, this spreading, the sin spreading within that locality, even the whole people around that locality, they also become cursed. To such an extent that there is also a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions that there was once a town in which there were people, they used to sin constantly. So what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? He sent an angel to go and destroy this town. So the angel went to destroy this town because it was a very sinful town, and he went there, but just before he was going to destroy this town, he saw one pious servant there. So he returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and said, Allah, there's this pious servant of yours. He just worships you, but he doesn't involve himself in the sin itself with the people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that this person is also included in this destruction. Destroy him as well. So you can see, even despite there being, righteous person, just one righteous person, but because of the entire society being corrupted and sin being widespread in that locality, this person too was also affected. In another meaning you could take of that hadith as well, is that this person, even though he was doing his own worship, he didn't do anything else, trying to restrict or trying to stop these people from committing sin. Also, in that context as well, is right that because of this evil society, evil town that he was living in, he also was, he was also included in this punishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent. So, sins are not like, and even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran itself, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس, that there is corruption has been spread in the land and in the sea. Why? Because of what the people have done, because of the deeds of Ibn Adam, because of the deeds of mankind. And we might, because of our sins, other people will suffer as well. And sins, they have such a detrimental effect that they cause blackness of the heart. There's one hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions that every time a man commits a sin, a black dot appears on his heart, and this dot will appear slowly until gradually his entire heart becomes blackened. I take another example, and the more blacker his heart becomes, the more harder it is for him to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the light to enter his heart and cleanse his heart and bring him back towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes difficult. Just like a person, if he's in a room and there's darkness on one side, darkness and light, it stops in the middle. Here's the darkness, here's the light. So a person in the middle. So the more he commits sins, more and more he commits sins, more and more he enters into the darkness. And sometimes what happens is, unfortunately, he'll commit sins so much, he'll go so much into the darkness that the light will become so far from him and he will not be able to find his way back. And once you're in the dark, you're going to trip up and you're going to fall over and you're going to hurt yourself. So this is the example of a person who indulges himself in sin and does not make an effort to stop. He sins and sins and sins continuously, and he gets so far that, there's to such an extent, we might think to ourselves, that's a bit far-fetched, but no. To such an extent that even his iman, his faith, his Islam is in danger. To such an extent that it's likely that he might even lose his iman. That's how far sins can take a person. It might seem far-fetched, but it's happened many times. A person goes so much into sins, he'll have drugs. He'll go so far that people will say to him, have these. He'll be absolutely skint. He'll have no money. He does not have anything to earn these drugs, so he'll just sell his soul just for this, just pack of drugs, just a few grams of drugs. So this is how detrimental and how bad a person can become, and how far it can take a person away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if a person keeps sinning. And how do we save ourselves from sin? We have to keep ourselves away from places of sin. We have to keep ourselves away from people who might make us commit sin. Imam Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi, he mentions that he was mentioning a couplet that shaitan, he is not as bad for a person. Before that, he mentions that a snake biting a person, that is more better for a person than for him to be attacked by shaitan. Why? Because a snake biting a person, it's more deadly, literally, and in the actual thing itself, more deadly than, I think it was a bad friend. I think it was actually, a bad friend. Why? Because the bite of, it was shaitan. Why? Because the bite of a snake, all it will do, it will kill a person. It's just going to kill him and he'll die. So it doesn't matter if he's mu'min, if he's a believer, it bites him, he'll die, but he'll die on iman. Whereas a bad friend, if a person stays in a bad friend's company, then this bad friend, he can have such a detrimental effect, like I mentioned before, that he might make him indulge in sins to such an extent that he's going to pass away, and maybe there's even a fear that he'll pass away he's died without iman, without Islam in his heart. But then he goes further and says that shaitan, even he is not as bad as a bad friend. Now, can you imagine? Shaitan is not even as bad to a person and harmful to a person than a bad friend. Why? Because shaitan, he cannot forcefully take us towards sin. What's the maximum he can do? Shaitan, he's going to put waswasa, he's going to put thoughts in your head, he's going to make you think of sins, but nothing more. But if you have a bad friend, a person who's in your company, what will he do? He won't just put these thoughts in your head, he's going to take you towards the sin itself. Literally, he'll grab you by the hand and he'll take you. He'll text you. He'll pester you. Peer pressure, something very quite prevalent in this day and age within youngsters. Peer pressure. You see a kid. He used to be a good guy. He used to come to the masjid. He used to pray his five daily namaz. He used to pray all of his namaz. He used to behave himself. And then what do you know? He goes to high school, and he's blended in with made new friends. Met some new people. And these people, they have bad habits. They smoke. They swear. They do all these kind of different things. They sin. And this person, because he stayed in these people's, in their circles, he becomes infatuated with what they do. Whatever their habits were, them evil habits, he starts adopting them. Sooner or later, he starts smoking. He starts, swearing. He starts talking bad about people. Starts listening to music. He starts doing all these evil kind of acts. Things that he never used to do before, he's starting to do them now. Before he used to see him five times daily namaz. He's there, every time. But now, if you look, you can't see him not in the masjid, nowhere near the masjid. This is a very, how bad effect that there is having a bad friend. It's just an extent that even there's a hadith as well again about where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, and he gives the example of good company and bad company. Good company, what is the example that he gives? He gives the example of a person who befriends a person who sells perfume. So what's the good benefit of a person who befriends a person who sells perfume? That he stays in his shop, and if he said he doesn't the person who sells perfume, if he doesn't take perfume off him, then the least that will happen to him is because he's staying in that person's suhbah, in this person's company. And because this person is surrounded by fragrances, by perfume, the fragrances will at least wear off a bit on him. So it'll have a good effect on him. He'll smell at least a bit nice because due to this person staying in this perfume shop. What is the bad? And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes further to mention the example of a person who befriends somebody who has bad habits. What's the example of a person who who has bad habits and this person has become his friend? The example is that of a blacksmith. That he has that thing, I don't know what you call it, that thing that gives out smoke. They use it to blow on the whatever thing that they're making, the blacksmith makes. And the blacksmith, wherever he's working, there's always smoke and there's always bad odor, bad smell, that working steel kind of smell kind of coming out, emitting from it. So this person, there's also sparks coming out. So this person, if he's in the company of that person, that blacksmith, then if there's a chance that he'll get burnt by the sparks coming from the blacksmith's work. And if he does save himself from the blacksmith's work, and the sparks don't touch him, then the very least that will happen to this person is that bad smoke that comes from the iron or whatever he is that he's working on, that's going to come onto this person's body. So this is the example that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave for a person who adopts good company. If he doesn't adopt this person, he doesn't adopt the characteristics and them things that his good friend carries out, he plays namaz, at least he's taking their company, he's going to benefit to some extent, and some of their actions are going to wear off on him. Whereas a bad person, just like, there's a chance he'll get indulged in the bad acts that these people are indulged in, and he might get burnt just like that person who befriends a blacksmith. But if he doesn't get affected directly by their friends, just like that person, the sparks don't fall on him, then all that bad smoke is going to come and infect him and he's going to smell bad. So this is the example that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave about befriending bad people and befriending good people. So we should always, strive to make, good friends. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu taqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqin. Oh, people who believe, fear Allah and, stay with the God-fearing people. And then there's another ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that that on the day of Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the day of Qiyamah, that on the day of Qiyamah, today you might be friends, but on the day of Qiyamah, those people who you were with, those people who didn't do any benefit to you, they were bad for you, they were harmful for your deen and your dunya, these people will be your enemies. This same friend that was willing to take a bullet for you, on the day of Qiyamah, he's going to run from you. He's not going to give a damn about you. He's just going to run as far as he can from you. But who does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exempt from this? from being your enemy on the day of Qiyamah. Which kind of friend will not be your enemy on the day of Qiyamah? Illa al-muttaqeen, those who are God-fearing. If you adopt God-fearing friends, if you adopt good company, then only then will these friends be of good use to you. And these friends will, and like I mentioned, I think on the first day again, when I was speaking, that these people, you should only love people for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These people, they should take you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They should call you for namaz. Unfortunately, again, the case is, instead of texting people, wake up for Fajr namaz, calling each other for Fajr namaz, we, call each other for going out, go to cinemas or go to shisha cafe or something like that. Go to useless places, go to places where sin is carried out. This is, how, and even, our respected Imam, the Khatib Maulana Nazir Sahib, he was mentioning the other day, that today's, one of the great fitnas of today within the youth today is friends. They value friends more than they value parents. They give value to friends more than parents. This is very sad. Parents have done so much hard work for us and they've done so much sacrifices for us. But, when they say something, son, get me a milk from Asda, get me get some tissue from the corner shop. We'll be like, oh yeah, after a bit, in a bit. But when friends call us, what happens? We jump out straight away. We don't care. In the middle of the night, jump out of the bed, go into the car and then drive off. This is how much, and this doesn't make any sense. So, how much, bad friends, bad company is very detrimental to a person's life. And very detrimental to a person's iman, especially. Life is one thing, and even, how many cases have there been? You'll see, especially in London and places like this, you hear of, drive-bys. And you'll hear, this drive-by happens, and what happens in this drive-by? An innocent boy has got shot. Why? Because, and what has he done? It's something to do with drugs, gang-related drive-by. Somebody's drove past this gang of lads, and they decide to open fire on them. And what happens in that process? They end up shooting an innocent boy that was with them at this time. This is take another example for you. How he's innocent. What's he done? But because he's adopted bad friends, he's in the wrong place with the wrong people. That's why, that's how much to such an extent bad friends can, cost you. They can cost you your life. Okay, so this is how important it is. Not only save ourselves from sin, save yourself from the means that, will take you towards sin. Whether it be friends, whether it be place, whether, it means like phones or anything. If a person is getting distracted from, from his ibadah, from worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever that means may be, that person has to cut that means loose. Whatever it may be, whatever distraction it may be, he should prioritize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made first upon him, he should put that first. Then anything else, as long as it's within the boundaries of the Sharia of the Islamic law, then that's fine. Otherwise, this person should leave these things. Otherwise, what's the outcome going to be? That he's destroyed himself, not only in this world, but in the hereafter. So, and like I mentioned, that brother requested, sins, not only do they affect us, but they affect the ummah in general. Like our Honorable Hafiz Kamal said yesterday, the ummah is a body. But just like a person, and he mentioned how a person, if a person, this hadith that the Rasulullah mentioned that al-Muslimuna karajulin wahid, that the Muslims, they're like, one body. That if the eye hurts, then the entire body hurts. If the head hurts, if the head hurts, then the entire body hurts. And this can be taken in both meanings. In physical aspects, that a person, if he sees his Muslim brother or he's hurting, he's been hurt, then this person should feel bad in his heart. But but this can be taken the other way as well. If he sees his Muslim brother committing sin, then this person should also feel very, bad in his heart. There's another hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one last point I'll mention, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that if a person, he sees his Muslim brother, he's committing sin, then he should try to his utmost best to, he should try to stop it with his hand. If not, and this person resists, then he should try with his tongue. He should try to stop this person with his tongue. And if not, then he should make, dua from his heart, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saves his brother from, this sin. And this is the lowest point of iman, to the closest meaning. That's what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned. So this is how, and imagine, and if a person, he sees a sin and he does not feel bad in his heart, then this person is also, our Ustaz Maulana Suhail Sahib, Hafizahullah, who's mentioning that this is the lowest point of Iman. And if a person, and then he went further to say, if a person does not even feel this much, that he sees his brother committing sin and he does not feel bad in his heart, then this person's Iman is also in danger. He's got khatra, he's got doubt in his own Iman. And there's shock about his own Iman. So this is how detrimental Iman, how to Iman sins can be. It affects person who commits it, person who is witnessing it being committed as well, and people who are even unaware of this, sin being committed. This is how very, and how much important it is that we save ourselves. Otherwise, you keep committing sin upon sin. You're just loading your baggage and making it heavier and heavier, and you're lightening your chances of entering the fire of hell. So it's not something, and hell, the punishment of hell is not something that we can get used to. Like a person, he takes whips, he's got 100 whips, to take punishment or something. He'll take 10 whips, it'll hurt. 20 whips, it'll hurt. And then slowly he'll get used to it. But if, punishment of the hereafter, every time a person gets one punishment and then that new flesh goes back, that second time he gets it is going to be, so many times worse than the first time. You're not going to get any used to it. It's going to get worse and worse every single time. So it's not something to be taken lightly. Sins, we should try our utmost best to save ourselves from sins. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the ability to save ourselves from sin. If we do commit sin, and the shaitan gets the better of us and we do end up committing sin, then may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability to repent to him, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our repentance. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdika, wa nashhadu la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب القبر وقنا عذاب الحشر وقنا عذاب الميزان واحشرنا يوم القيامة مع المتقين مع الأبرار اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وعملا صالحا متقبلا وشفاء من كل داء اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم وعافنا يا رحيم اللهم إنا نسألك حبك وحب من يحبك وحب عمل الذي يبلغنا حبك اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذ منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنت المستعان ولا البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله جزا الله عنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم بما هو أهله وصلى الله على النبي الأمي سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين برحمتك يا رب العالمين.